Good evening. My name is Jerry Hosey. This is discussion post number 4 for HIUS 512 American Revolution at Liberty University. My topic for our final discussion post of the semester is the subject of my research paper for the semester entitled The Boston Tea Party, the Chief Cause that Led to the Battles of Lexington and Concord. The question I attempt to answer in this project is how was the Boston Tea Party in 1773, as opposed to earlier events, the chief cause of subsequent events that led to the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775? My thesis statement for this project and an overall conclusion in conducting this research is that the Boston Tea Party changed the way the British government looked at the American colonies to such a degree that reacted in ways that it would not have done previously in previous confrontations, causing the colonists to take drastic steps that the king and parliament saw as open rebellion and setting events in motion that led to the battles of Lexington and Concord. This is not a research project that assumes the Boston Tea Party is the cause of the American Revolution. The revolution itself is much bigger than can be the result of any single cause. But I do believe that the Boston Tea Party was a seminal event that led to the first battles of the war. And I believe that my research proves that to be true. The overarching reason that I believe the Boston Tea Party was the chief catalyst to the beginning of fighting is that the event changed the perception that Great Britain had of the colonies, especially Boston, but eventually the others as well. Before the Tea Party, Great Britain's perceptions were that Americans were concerned about taxes and representation. They wanted to be part of the empire. It's just a bump in the road. It's just we're having a squabbling between entities together. But after the Tea Party, the perception drastically changed, especially about Boston. Lord North, Prime Minister of Great Britain at the time, speaking to Parliament in March 1774, while discussing the coercive acts, which we'll get to later, states that, quote, they are not entering into a dispute about internal and external taxes, not between taxes laid for the purposes of revenue and taxes laid for the regulation of trade, not between representation and taxation or legislation and taxation, but we are now to dispute the question whether we have or have not any authority in that country, end quote. And that was a big change in perception, and it was one that would lead throughout the rest of the time, especially during the Revolutionary War itself. They didn't have prior to that time. The change in perception brings about a drastic change in reaction from Parliament and Crown. Before the Tea Party, in most instances, reactions from the British were more conciliatory in nature. Sending troops to Boston in 1768 and the Boston Massacre are certainly two exceptions to that. But for the most part, the British reacted to the colonists with more conciliatory measures. Take the Stamp Act of 1765, for instance. The colonists reacted in similar ways as they did to the Coercive Act in 1774, with trade embargoes, a Stamp Act Congress, etc. But the British reacted by repealing the Stamp Act, I think, the next year. The same result, for the most part, would happen with the Townshend duties of 1767. The British repealed most of those duties in 1770, except for the tax on tea. And to remind you, the British were invoking these taxes to help pay for the cost of the French and Indian War, which ended in 1763 and gave the British a vast landscape to control in North America. Even after the Gaspee incident in 1772, where Rhode Islanders burned a British ship to the ground because it was seizing vessels and goods, the British reacted by sending the issue to die by committee, so to speak, where they set up a council to investigate, but nothing happened. It was a useless committee, and those are a dime a dozen these days. The responses to the Boston Tea Party, on the other hand, were quite vicious, such as the Coercive Act in 1774, which closed down the port of Boston. It bankrupted the city just about. It moved the government of Massachusetts to Salem. It changed the charter of the state. It made it destitute upon the king and crown. These things led to citizens of Massachusetts and eventually the rest of the colonies to take very drastic actions, such as setting up provincial governments, sending delegates to the First Continental Congress. They started smuggling goods such as guns and ammunition from other countries, which is actually part of the reason General Gage sent British regulars to find and destroy guns and ammunition depots at Lexington and Concord. As Mary Beth Norton fantastically shows in her book 1774, The Long Year of Revolution, which I do think you should buy and read, it's a great book. All these events, when discussed, featured the Boston Tea Party at their roots. The tea was always a topic of conversation, especially payment of the tea, or should they not. Minutes from the First Continental Congress show that as well. The tea was certainly a topic there. And this belies my third point, that when the British reacted differently, the Americans reacted differently too. Instead of rhetoric and organized economic resistance within an empire, the Americans led violent resistance, which led to a break from empire. Nick Bunker's analysis of the Empire on the Edge is great, in my opinion, and that the British Empire was a commercial empire built on and running on tea, which is probably why the British kept tea tax when it repealed the others and the townshend duties. But it also explains why, when the Americans actually messed with the tea in the Tea Party, the British reacted in the way they reacted. They reacted really strongly, and which is the way they did not do when the Americans were protesting the townshend duties. So, in closing, the Boston Tea Party changed how the British perceived the colonists in America. That, in turn, changed how the British reacted to the colonists, which, in turn, changed how the Americans responded to those British reactions in ways that did not happen beforehand. And before you know it, the shot heard around the world rang out on April 19, 1775, at Lexington and Concord. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your night.